The manifest error. I had been hauling freight for Meridian Logistics for 11 years when the Route 19 assignment appeared on my dispatch tablet. At 38, divorced, and living out of my Kenworth more than any apartment I had ever rented, my life was a quiet rhythm of routine, solitude, and predictability. Each day began the same way, checking manifests, planning fuel stops, inspecting my truck, and logging miles. Over the years, I had encountered breakdowns, weather delays, and minor accidents, but I had learned to anticipate problems and mitigate them. I knew which stretches of road were safe and which were prone to mechanical failures. I knew when to call for backup and when to handle situations alone. My existence revolved around schedules, CB radio chatter, and careful observation. I felt in control. That control ended the moment I accepted Route 19. At first glance, the assignment seemed like a mistake. Route 19 had been officially decommissioned in 2008 after 3 drivers reported mechanical failures along the same 70-mile stretch through rural Nebraska. Those incidents had been logged, the route closed, and the company's system updated to prevent further scheduling. Yet here it was, blinking on my dispatch tablet. A pickup in Kearney, delivery to Hallett Township, a place I could find on no map, state record, or satellite image. My dispatcher, Karen, swore it was likely a system error, but the cargo was legitimate. Agricultural equipment fully manifested, with a tight delivery deadline. Declining it would have jeopardized my contract, so I took it. The uncertainty lingered, but I told myself it was just an anomaly, and I had jobs to complete. The first 30 miles of the route were unremarkable. Nebraska's flat cornfields stretched on either side of the 2-lane blacktop. Traffic was sparse, the morning quiet. Then, around mile 40, the asphalt deteriorated sharply. Potholes jarred the Kenworth, gravel replaced smooth blacktop, and weeds split the lane in jagged lines. My GPS signal disappeared, leaving me reliant on mile markers I barely recognized. CB radio chatter devolved into static, then a low, rhythmic hum that seemed to resonate through the cab. I initially considered interference from nearby power lines or farm equipment, but it persisted and was unsettling. Then I saw the truck. A Freightliner from the 90s, parked sideways across both lanes, unmarked and unlit. I stopped 50 feet back, idling, flashlight in hand. The driver's seat was soaked in something dark and sticky, congealed with age. A manifest was still secured to the dash with bungee cords, the delivery address matching mine, Hallett Township. The date on it read September 14th, 2009. I radioed for help. Nothing. Only the low, continuous hum. That's when I heard the hiss of air brakes behind me. Another truck had appeared in my rearview mirror. No headlights, no markings, just rolling forward slowly, deliberately. I ran back to my Kenworth, threw it in gear, and swerved around the abandoned Freightliner. Beyond it, the road became barely recognizable. A narrow gravel track with weeds splitting the lanes. I tried to reverse or turn back, but the pursuing truck maintained exact distance, 20 feet behind, regardless of my speed. I drove for 2 hours, fuel gauge dropping impossibly fast, until I reached what could only be described as a town. A single grain elevator, 3 buildings with caved-in roofs, and a loading dock surrounded by dozens of abandoned trucks, all lined up in perfect rows, like a graveyard. My headlights swept across windshields. Every cab contained a driver, slumped over, mummified by time. Their presence was horrifying in its repetition. 14 similar incidents between 1998 and 2008 had been reported, 7 drivers never returning. Manifest completed, cargo vanished, trucks abandoned. The pattern was unmistakable, deliberate, and ongoing. I did not stop. I swerved hard left, crashing through a wooden fence, and found an old farm access road that eventually dumped me onto State Highway 61 just as the sun came up. My fuel tank was bone dry, yet I coasted into Holdrig and collapsed at a gas station. State police recovered my truck 3 hours later. Cargo was gone, trailer doors open, no tire tracks, no signs of forced entry. The manifest on my dash had changed to read Route Fulfilled. Nebraska Department of Transportation records confirmed that Route 19 had been officially closed since 2007 due to geographic anomalies. Attempts to discuss the incident with Meridian Logistics were met with refusal. I was terminated for unauthorized route deviation and instructed not to return. State authorities provided little assistance. Internal memos, historical logs, and prior driver complaints were either redacted or missing entirely. Evidence of the 14 prior incidents existed only in fragmented reports. The systematic suppression of information indicated institutional complicity. It became apparent that Route 19 was not merely a decommissioned route, but part of a concealed operation. In the weeks that followed, I became aware of subtle surveillance. Vehicles appeared where I parked. Shadows lingered outside motels. Phone calls ended abruptly when I answered. CB radios occasionally emitted the same low, rhythmic hum I had heard on Route 19. Journalists pursuing similar stories experienced evidence destruction, memory card deletion, and implied threats. The operation was active, controlled, and monitored. I began cataloging encounters, recording license plates, times, and patterns. The more I documented, the more I realized this was not an isolated phenomenon. Through persistent research, I obtained manifests from abandoned trucks, photographs of rotted cabs, and audio recordings of the low hum. Interviews with surviving drivers revealed repeated patterns: pursuing trucks, road sign inconsistencies, GPS failures, and the absence of local law enforcement intervention. Physical evidence indicated a hidden logistical network, potentially sanctioned by higher authorities, in which drivers either disappeared or were coerced into compliance. The scope of the conspiracy extended beyond company negligence into active collusion. One night, while reviewing my data at a motel, I encountered a man in a Meridian jacket. At first, his question seemed casual, but when I mentioned Route 19, his demeanor shifted. Threats were subtle, but unmistakable. Some roads aren't meant to be traveled again. Forget this. The warning was clear. Route 19 was being actively maintained, monitored, and controlled. I left Nebraska permanently, realizing that engaging further was too dangerous. Federal investigation files and internal memos indicated a quiet review, yet there was no public disclosure. Journalists attempting to pursue the story faced lost evidence and silenced witnesses. 14 trucks, 14 drivers, 7 never returned. Official records labeled the events as geographic and logistical anomalies. Meridian Logistics faced no consequences. The manifests, missing cargo, and driver reports were never fully analyzed publicly, yet the pattern persisted. Somewhere, Route 19 still exists. Trucks line invisible roads, cargo is delivered and disappears. Drivers vanish, and the town waits silently. The low hum, abandoned cabs, and mummified drivers remain in memory, a reminder that the operation continues. Unchecked. I now check every route meticulously, aware that a deviation might lead to the same unseen, unresolved danger. Somewhere in Nebraska, Route 19 waits, its deliveries ongoing, its drivers disappearing, its secret preserved by institutional silence. The lot attendant. I was 41 years old in the fall of 2019, working nights as the shift manager at a TA truck stop west of Tulsa. It wasn't a stepping stone job or a temporary thing. I'd been there 6 years, long enough to know the rhythms of the place. Which pumps stuck in cold weather, which drivers slept light, which security lights flickered but never quite failed. I handled payroll disputes, late-night altercations, lost wallets, medical calls. The lot itself was my responsibility. I walked it every shift, sometimes twice. There were no blind corners I didn't know about, no employees I couldn't name. That's why what I saw at 2:30 a.m. on October 3rd registered immediately as wrong. I was in the front office, finishing a fuel variance report, when I noticed headlights sweeping across the far edge of the property, beyond the painted parking lines, near the fence that separated us from an unused field. Trucks don't go there. There's no lighting, no striping, no access road. From the window, I could see a figure in a reflective vest standing in that dark back corner, moving a flashlight in slow, practiced arcs. At first, I assumed it was Darnell, our overnight security guard. Then I remembered Darnell didn't carry a flashlight like that, and he didn't wear a vest. I keyed the radio and asked if he'd been reassigned to lot control. He came back immediately, confused. Said he was by the fuel islands and hadn't moved. I watched 3 rigs follow the signals. One by one, they rolled past the last marked space and disappeared into the dirt beyond the fence line, where there shouldn't have been room for anything larger than weeds. That was the trigger moment. The part of my brain trained by years of incident reports kicked in. Unknown personnel, unauthorized traffic, safety liability. I put on my jacket and walked out. The farther I got from the building, the quieter it became. The highway noise thinned. The hum of idling engines dropped away. When I reached the edge of the paved lot, I realized the trucks that had followed the attendant weren't running. No headlights, no engine vibration, no silhouettes shifting inside the cabs. They were just there. Dark shapes against darker ground. The man turned toward me as I closed the distance. He was wearing a TA uniform, but not one I recognized. The logo was an older stitch, faded almost white, the fabric worn thin and stained. His face was pale and slack, like he hadn't slept in a long time. When he spoke, his voice sounded wet, as if he were talking through fluid. "Lot's full tonight," he said. "Got room for 30 more. I told him he was trespassing. I told him to leave the property immediately. He smiled, showing teeth that were darkened almost to black, and pointed the flashlight toward the fence. Beyond it, in the field that had never been accessible, I could see rows of trucks, 20, maybe more, all parked neatly, all silent. I didn't stay out there. I went back inside and called Tulsa PD. They arrived about 20 minutes later. By then, the man was gone. The flashlight was gone. The trucks were not. Officers walked the dirt lot with me and Darnell. They checked doors, ran plates, called in VINs. Every single truck had been reported stolen or abandoned, the reports spanning nearly 2 decades, from the late 1980s through the early 2000s. The cabs were empty, no personal effects, no signs of struggle. On the dashboard of each truck was a handwritten note, folded once, placed deliberately. Every note read the same. Lot attendant says stay. That was the first hard evidence, and it forced the situation out of the realm of a one-off incident. Oklahoma Highway Patrol took over within 48 hours. They treated it as a cold case convergence, multiple thefts intersecting at a single location. They pulled employment records, maintenance logs, incident reports. That's when the name Eugene Ferris surfaced. Ferris had worked that exact TA location between 1983 and 1992 as a lot attendant. Personnel files described him as punctual, quiet, eventually erratic. Multiple drivers had complained that he directed them into unofficial parking areas and demanded cash for protection. He was terminated after an internal audit found discrepancies tied to those complaints. In 1993, his body was found in a drainage ditch 2 miles from the truck stop. Cause of death was listed as undetermined. The file noted the body had been there for weeks. When I asked for a copy of the investigation summary, I was told it wasn't available. When I followed up, I was told the records had been archived. When I pressed again, corporate advised me to let law enforcement handle it. That was the institutional resistance phase. Meetings where no one took notes, emails that went unanswered, subtle pressure to stop asking questions. Corporate closed off the back section of the lot, poured concrete over the dirt, and installed a chain-link fence. Officially, it was a safety upgrade. I reviewed our security footage from that night. The cameras showed trucks turning and pulling into the back lot exactly as I'd seen. But the attendant never appeared. No body, no vest, no face, just the beam of a flashlight moving on its own. After that, things escalated. Drivers reported being waved toward the fence line at night. A few said someone knocked on their cab and told them the lot was full. One driver refused and found his airlines cut the next morning. Another claimed he'd parked legally and woke to find his truck missing, keys still in his pocket. I started noticing cars idling across the road when I left my shift. Unmarked, lights off. I can't prove they were connected, but the timing lined up with my continued cooperation with Highway Patrol. The critical discovery came from a retired state investigator who contacted me off-record. He said similar patterns had surfaced at 2 other truck stops along the same corridor in the late 80s, both quietly resolved, both tied back to informal lot control schemes that never made it into official theft statistics. Not long after that conversation, a joint task force executed a limited operation. I wasn't briefed. I just showed up one night to find federal vehicles parked where the missing trucks had been. By morning, they were gone. No press release followed, no arrests announced. I transferred to Kansas 3 months later. It was framed as a promotion. I took it because staying felt unsafe. The aftermath hasn't brought closure. The Tulsa location still operates. The fenced-off section remains. Drivers continue to report seeing a man in a reflective vest near that fence, waving a flashlight. Corporate dismisses it as rumor. Every few months, another truck disappears from that lot. No forced entry, no theft report until the owner fails to check in. Drivers still call me. They recognize my name from old schedules. They tell me someone tried to wave them into the back lot. They say he told them there's room for 30 more. I tell them the same thing every time, keep driving, because whatever started there didn't end with Eugene Ferris, and whatever authority decided not to finish that investigation is still silent. The lot is quieter now, but it's not empty, and the spaces he was saving were never meant for trucks alone. The Way Station. I was 34 years old in the summer of 2021, running refrigerated freight as an independent contractor along I-40. It was steady work, quiet work, long stretches of highway between Arkansas distribution points and the western hubs. I preferred the night runs. Less traffic, fewer inspections, fewer conversations. My routine was predictable. Pre-trip inspection at midnight. Thermostat locked at 34 degrees, logbook squared away. I crossed into Arkansas just after 2 a.m., westbound, cruise set, radio low. I had driven that corridor for years. I knew every mile marker, every rest area, every abandoned business along the frontage roads. There was no active way station near Clarksville. there hadn't been for as long as I'd been driving. That's why the sign caught my attention. It appeared just past mile marker 55. Green reflective panel. Arkansas Department of Transportation logo. Block lettering. All commercial vehicles must stop, weigh station 1 mile. I slowed without thinking, checked my mirrors, checked the dash clock. 3:58 a.m. I told myself it was temporary, a mobile inspection detail. It happens. But the sign placement was wrong, too permanent, too clean. Then I saw the arrow boards, portable units, flashing amber, staged along the shoulder, funneling traffic toward the upcoming exit. I keyed the radio and asked if anyone else was seeing it. A driver a few miles ahead answered. He said to ignore it. Said there was nothing there, said he'd seen weird stuff on that stretch before and kept rolling. As we approached the ramp, brake lights bloomed ahead of me. One truck, then another, then a line. Tankers, reefers, box trucks, dozens of commercial vehicles signaling right, following the arrows off the highway. I stayed in the left lane. As I passed the exit, I looked over. The ramp lights were on, bright, too bright for an abandoned access road. I saw silhouettes moving, figures between trucks, reflective vests catching the light. I didn't see faces, I didn't see a scale house, just motion and the slow procession of rigs disappearing downhill. Then the ramp curved, and they were gone. The highway went quiet again. 2 days later, I was back in Little Rock unloading when my phone lit up with messages. A dispatcher, another driver, then a news alert. 11 commercial trucks had failed to check in. All had last transmitted GPS data along I-40 near Clarksville. No emergency calls, no crash reports, no debris. By the end of the day, Arkansas State Police were asking for information. I called them and told them about the weigh station. The trooper on the line went silent for a moment. Then he told me there was no weigh station at that location. Hadn't been since 2006. It had been demolished after an internal corruption investigation. The land was fenced off. No access, no utilities. He asked if I was sure about the signs. I was. A unit was sent to the exit I described. They found concrete barriers pushed back into the weeds. The off-ramp was choked with vegetation. No fresh tire marks, no arrow boards, no signage of any kind. The troopers reported that it looked untouched for years. But when they walked the old access road on foot, they noticed something irregular. The ground where the weigh station had once stood was clear, recently cleared, not paved. Just bare earth, compacted. In the center of it, tire tracks converged. 11 distinct sets. They led inward from different angles, tightening to a single point, and then they stopped. No turnaround marks, no exit paths. That's when the Department of Transportation was brought in. DOT records confirmed the site's history. The weigh station had been shut down in 2006 after an inspector named Leonard Pruitt was arrested for falsifying weight tickets and soliciting bribes. Drivers who paid were waved through overweight. Those who didn't were detained for hours. Some were cited for violations that didn't exist. Pruitt died in county lockup before trial. Official cause, medical event. The case was closed. The station was demolished. The land was declared unstable due to karst geology, limestone prone to collapse. Ground-penetrating radar was ordered as a formality. It didn't come back clean. Beneath the cleared area was a void, a cavern system extending more than 200 feet down. The roof had partially collapsed decades earlier, then stabilized. Recent disturbances, heavy loads, had caused further subsidence. Excavation crews were brought in under joint supervision. What they pulled up over the next week never made the evening news in full. Metal fragments, axle housings, refrigeration units crushed flat, cargo container panels twisted like foil, and remains. 7 sets were identifiable through dental records. All belonged to drivers reported missing between 1998 and 2005. All had last been logged near Clarksville. All had open complaints in DOT files accusing an inspector of extortion. 4 additional sets of remains were recovered. 2 degraded for identification. No personal effects survived intact. Leonard Pruitt's arrest file was reopened. Buried within it were handwritten notes from investigators who never testified. Statements from drivers who said Pruitt threatened them with permanent holds if they refused to pay. One affidavit quoted him directly. "There are places trucks go where they don't come back from." The implication was clear. Overweight trucks diverted off the highway, driven onto compromised ground, parked, left idling until the surface gave way. An accident disguised as enforcement. The official explanation was geological failure compounded by historical negligence. No living suspects, no criminal charges. The exit was sealed. Permanent signage installed. No truck traffic. Concrete barriers reinforced. The land reclassified. And then the reports started again. Drivers calling dispatchers, calling state police, describing way station signs that weren't supposed to exist, portable aero boards, reflective vests, always between 3 and 4 a.m., always gone by daylight. DOT denied deploying any mobile inspections in that corridor. State police denied conducting stops there. No equipment was logged out, no personnel assigned. I stopped running that route. I added hours to my trips, detoured north through Missouri, lost contracts over it. But I didn't care. I had seen those trucks turn off. I had seen the lights. I knew how official it all looked. Every now and then, late at night, I still hear the radio chatter. Drivers asking if anyone else sees the signs. Someone telling them to keep going. Sometimes there's no answer. The way station near Clarksville is officially closed, but something there is still directing traffic. The fuel stop receipt. I was 29 and still new enough to long-haul work that every run felt like a test I could fail. My days were built around compliance and routine, pre-trip inspection, logbook entries, fuel stops at the same chain locations, coffee that tasted the same no matter what state I was in. I drove nights because traffic was lighter and because, early on, no one senior wanted those hours. I didn't question it. The job rewarded silence and consistency. The run that matters started like all the others. I'd come east from Indiana, 14 hours logged legally but barely, and needed diesel before turning west again. It was November, cold enough that the air carried sound farther than it should. The travel center sat just off the interstate, a rectangle of light in otherwise flat darkness. I pulled to an open pump, swiped my fleet card and let the tank fill. 80 gallons, nothing unusual. The trigger came when I tore the receipt from the machine. The date and time were correct. The pump number matched. Beneath it, in uneven ink that bled slightly into the paper, were 5 words. "Don't stop at mile 127. I assumed a prank. Drivers mess with each other, and the highway breeds that kind of humor. But the paper itself was thermal, the kind that prints gray and fades with heat. You can't write on it before it prints. I went inside and showed the cashier. She didn't laugh. She stared, then took the receipt like it might stain her hands. She said the printer only spits out blank rolls sealed from a supplier. No one had access. She disappeared into a back office and came out with the night manager, a man who carried himself like he'd been awake too long. He asked where I was headed. When I told him west, his jaw tightened. He said 6 months earlier another driver had received the same receipt, same pump, same handwriting. That driver had continued on the interstate and vanished near mile marker 127. They told me his name. They told me the state police had been notified. They told me his truck was found 3 days later. Engine running, cargo untouched, parked on the shoulder like he'd just stepped away. No signs of a struggle, no blood. His logbook was open to a single line he hadn't written before. He was waiting at 127. I should have shut down right there, but freight deadlines don't pause for stories, and fear feels abstract when you're warm and under fluorescent lights. Mile 127 was on my route. I convinced myself it was coincidence layered onto rumor. I left just before midnight. The geography out there is deceptive. It looks empty, but it isn't remote in the way mountains are remote. It's open, flat, and exposed. Sound carries. Fog rolls in from nowhere and eats distance. By mile 125, the highway was empty enough that my own engine felt intrusive. The CB radio crackled, a low distortion that cut through the cab. A voice came through, flat and close. You should have listened. I switched channels. The voice followed, bleeding through static like it knew where I was. At mile 126, my headlights caught a shape on the shoulder. A person waving beside a semi pulled over at an angle. The truck's markings were wrong in a way I couldn't articulate until I was closer. Then I recognized them. The same unit number the manager had told me. The same company logo. That truck had been impounded months earlier. I started to slow. Then the figure stepped into the lane. High beams washed him in white. His skin looked pale, stretched. His mouth hung open. His eyes reflected light the way animals do. I swerved and felt the trailer start to fishtail. In my mirror, the figure ran. Not toward the shoulder, not away, but parallel, keeping pace. The speedometer read 70. At mile 128, there was nothing behind me but fog. I didn't stop until I crossed the river into the city. I filed an incident report with my company's safety department at first light. They pulled my dash camera footage. The clip showed 4 seconds of a man in the road holding a rectangle of paper. Then the video corrupted, blocks of color swallowing the frame. Audio dropped. The file metadata showed no tampering. State police reopened the old case. They asked me to give a statement. They asked me for the receipt. I gave them copies. They canvassed mile 127 and found a culvert set back from the shoulder. Buried there were remains belonging to 4 drivers, reported missing over a 5-year span. Cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma consistent with vehicle collision. There were no skid marks, no debris, no reports of accidents. The official conclusion was that someone had staged breakdowns to lure drivers and kill them. No suspect was identified. The travel center manager was told not to discuss it further. When investigators examined the original receipt from the first disappearance, the handwritten note had vanished. Just a blank transaction record on faded paper. There were other irregularities. Dispatch logs showed rerouted patrols on that stretch during the times of the disappearances. A county maintenance supervisor had signed off on repeated shoulder repairs that never appeared in aerial photos. Requests for traffic camera footage came back incomplete, files missing timestamps. When a federal agency took interest, cooperation improved briefly and then stopped. Records were sealed. The culvert was filled in. I kept my receipt. It stayed legible, ink dark against gray paper. Weeks later, the words changed. They didn't fade, they shifted. You made it. He's waiting for someone else. I drive a different route now. Mile 127 is still there. Trucks still pass it at night. The official case remains open, inactive. Sometimes, on quiet roads, the radio crackles on its own. I don't answer. The Convoy. I was 47 years old in February of 2020. I had been driving long-haul freight for 23 years, almost all of it clean. No accidents, no missed loads, no discipline on file. My routes were routine, my logs boring, my days measured in way stations and rest stops. I drove nights because traffic was lighter and because, after 2 decades, I trusted the road more than people. That winter, my ordinary life consisted of a rented duplex outside Little Rock, a rotating sleep schedule, and a J.B. Hunt-issued Freightliner with updated telematics and an electronic logging device I didn't question. I hauled sealed electronics containers from Memphis to Dallas twice a week. The run paid well and never changed. Same interstate, same fuel stops, same radio chatter on Channel 19. It was predictable enough that I sometimes drove entire stretches on muscle memory alone. The trigger came without ceremony, no call, no special assignment, no deviation on my dispatch screen. On February 14th, I left Memphis just before sunset, logged my hours, and merged onto I-30 westbound. Weather was clear, traffic was thin. By midnight, I was crossing into Arkansas, running steady at 68. Just after 2 a.m., near Benton, I noticed headlights in my mirrors aligning too precisely to be coincidence. One rig eased up on my left, another on my right, and a third settled directly behind me at a textbook safe distance. Their speeds matched mine within a fraction of a mile per hour. When I drifted right to create space, the right side truck drifted with me. When I tapped the brakes, all three adjusted simultaneously. Convoys happen, but not like that. There was no CB chatter, no casual coordination, no visual acknowledgement. The windows on all three cabs were dark. Too dark for legal tint. I changed lanes deliberately. They changed with me. I slowed to 60. They slowed to 60. I accelerated to 72. They followed. I reached for the CB microphone and called out on Channel 19, the universal trucker frequency. "Breaker, breaker. You 3 trucks boxing me in, back off, and pass." There was no response at first. Then the speaker hissed with static, followed by a male voice I didn't recognize. Flat, neutral. "Convoy protocol active. Maintain formation." I had never heard the term. I asked again who was calling. The channel went dead. A minute later, my engine began to lose power. Not a stall, not a misfire. Something smoother, controlled. Warning lights bloomed across my dash. One message repeated in amber text. "External governor engaged." That feature wasn't supposed to exist. Fleet governors were internal, company-controlled, and logged. I tried to override it manually. The throttle responded sluggishly, capped well below what the engine could handle. Every maneuver I attempted was mirrored by the trucks around me. Their precision wasn't human. It was algorithmic. For 40 miles, we moved like that. No traffic cut between us. No patrol cars passed. The night felt artificially empty, as if the interstate had been cleared ahead of us. At mile marker 74, without warning, all 4 trucks, including mine, signaled and exited onto a ramp I didn't recognize. There was no signage, no reflective paint, just pavement cutting into dense forest. My steering wheel tightened under my hands, resisting input. I realized I wasn't driving anymore. I was being driven. The road narrowed into an unlit 2-lane path. Trees closed in on both sides. After 15 minutes, the forest opened into a clearing I had never seen on any map. An old freight depot, its concrete cracked but intact, floodlights mounted high but unlit. Dozens of trucks were parked in perfect rows, engines idling, facing the same direction. My engine shut down. The driver's door unlocked with a mechanical click. I stayed in my seat. My hands were shaking. Footsteps approached. A man appeared at my window wearing a reflective vest and holding a clipboard. His face was ordinary in the way some officials are. No distinguishing features, no visible emotion. He tapped the glass once, lightly. "Delivery inspection," he said. "Step out." I told him I had no delivery scheduled. He smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, you do," he said. "You've been carrying it for 3 years." That was when I noticed the other drivers. They stood outside their trucks in straight lines, all facing the depot. They didn't speak, they didn't move. Up close, they looked wrong. Too thin, skin sallow, eyes sunken and unfocused. Some wore uniforms from companies that had gone out of business years earlier. Their badges were faded. Their faces looked exhausted beyond sleep deprivation, like men who hadn't left that place in months. I reached for my phone. No signal. The ignition was dead. The man tapped the window again, harder this time. "Step out," he said, "or we'll extract you." I didn't negotiate. I crawled into the sleeper, kicked out the emergency exit, and ran into the woods without a plan. Behind me, engines roared to life in unison. I didn't look back. I ran until my lungs burned, until I hit pavement and waved down a passing car. The driver took me to the Arkansas State Police Barracks in Texarkana. I gave my statement at dawn. Troopers logged my account, polite but visibly skeptical. A unit was dispatched to locate the exit. They found the mile marker. The ramp was there. But the road led nowhere. No clearing, no depot, just uninterrupted forest. They pulled my truck's GPS and ELD data. According to the logs, I had never left I-30. No deviation, no loss of signal. But my odometer showed an extra 60 miles. J.B. Hunt's fleet management confirmed something else. My engine had been remotely governed by an external signal. The source wasn't theirs. It didn't appear in any system logs. My cargo arrived in Dallas 3 days later, delivered by another driver. That driver had no memory of picking it up. The FBI contacted me 2 weeks later. They called it a convoy hijacking investigation. They didn't say who authorized it, only that my case matched dozens of others. Between 2016 and 2020, 47 drivers had reported forced formations, missing time, and unexplained mileage. 12 were still missing. There were no arrests. No depot was ever located. The case was eventually classified and folded into a broader federal review of freight security vulnerabilities. I quit long-haul driving that spring. I run local routes now. Home every night. But truckers still talk. They talk about phantom convoys in Arkansas. Trucks moving in perfect formation, no drivers visible. Voices on CB channels that don't exist. Somewhere out there, a depot is still receiving deliveries, and the convoy is still running. The passenger. I was 36 years old in April of 2019, a regional driver running predictable freight lanes between Kansas City and Omaha. I had been with Werner Enterprises long enough that the job had become mechanical. Checklists, timestamps, weight distribution, fuel stops. Nothing surprised me anymore. The routes were familiar. The rest areas blurred together. My life was measured in miles and logbooks. That night started the same way every other shift did. I finished loading at the Lenexa warehouse just before midnight. Weather was clear, but heavy clouds were rolling in from the west. I walked the trailer, checked the seal numbers, inspected the tires, lights, and brakes. Everything passed. Unit 4429 had no flags in the maintenance system. I climbed into the cab, logged my departure, and pulled onto I-35 North. 10 minutes into the drive, somewhere past the suburban spillover, I heard breathing behind me. It wasn't loud, it wasn't panicked. It was slow, steady, deliberate, close enough that I could feel it more than hear it. The sleeper berth was sealed off by a curtain. I had not stopped. No doors had opened, no alarms had triggered. I braked hard and pulled onto the shoulder. I grabbed my flashlight, yanked the curtain open, and swept the sleeper berth. Empty, bedding undisturbed, no bags, no footprints. The breathing continued. This time it was coming from the passenger side. I turned. The seat was empty, the cab was empty. But the seatbelt was buckled, pulled tight across the seat as if restraining someone who wasn't there. I unbuckled it and let it snap back. The breathing stopped immediately. I radioed dispatch. I explained what had happened, sticking to facts, sounds, seatbelt position, timeline. Dispatch told me I was likely experiencing fatigue hallucinations and advised me to pull over and rest. They logged no incident report. They told me to continue when I felt clear. I didn't rest. I kept driving. At mile 52, the CB radio crackled. One channel, no carrier brake. A woman's voice came through, calm and close. "Thank you for the ride." I checked the mirrors. In the passenger side mirror, I saw her reflection, sitting upright, hands folded in her lap. She was soaked, hair plastered to her face, wearing a torn dress that clung to her arms. I looked directly at the seat. Empty. I looked back at the mirror. She was staring at me. I exited immediately and called local police. They arrived 20 minutes later. They searched the cab, the sleeper, the trailer. No forced entry, no signs of tampering. When one officer leaned on the passenger seat, he stopped and pressed his palm into the cushion. It was wet. Cold water soaked through the fabric. They asked if I'd spilled anything. I hadn't. They ran my license, checked my logs, and advised me to get rest before continuing. No report was filed beyond a wellness check. I finished the run to Omaha. The entire drive, I felt weight shift in the passenger seat during turns. Every time I glanced right, the seatbelt was buckled again. I filed a report with the Werner's Safety Department the next morning. It was dismissed as driver's stress. No inspection was ordered. 2 weeks later, another Werner driver filed a nearly identical report. Same route, same breathing, same wet passenger seat, then another. Within 3 months, 7 drivers had submitted internal safety complaints tied to I-35 North. All were quietly closed. Werner eventually initiated an internal review, not of the route, but of the equipment. Unit 4429's VIN history revealed a fatal crash in 2006. A driver named Evelyn Marsh had hydroplaned during a storm near Emporia, Kansas. Her truck left the roadway and entered a retention pond beside the interstate. She drowned in the cab. Her body wasn't recovered for 3 days. The truck had been salvaged, refurbished, and returned to service. Officially, it was retired in 2013. Unofficially, drivers continued reporting the same phenomena in different units on the same stretch of road. Kansas Highway Patrol was eventually looped in, not because of the reports, but because of a pattern of fatalities. Between 1998 and 2019, 12 truck drivers died in single-vehicle accidents along that corridor. All occurred during rain, all near standing water. No mechanical failures, no intoxication, no medical events. Witnesses consistently reported sudden swerving, as if the driver had been startled by something inside the cab. Those witness statements were archived but never cross-referenced. When I requested records through a public information request, I received heavily redacted summaries. Names removed, locations generalized, causes listed as loss of control. No one wanted to connect them. I transferred routes, short hauls, daylight only. 6 months later, I filled in for a sick driver. The load went north from Kansas City. Rain had started just past Lenexa. At mile 52, the CB radio activated. "Thank you for the ride." She was in the mirror again, this time pointing forward. I looked ahead and saw a stalled car in my lane. No lights, no hazards. I swerved just in time. When I stopped, police confirmed the vehicle, a family of 4, broken down in the rain. They said I'd prevented a fatal collision. When I explained why I swerved, they dismissed it. But one officer paused and said quietly, "You're the 3rd driver this year who's told me a ghost warned them on this route." No formal investigation followed. I don't drive I-35 anymore, but I keep the last dispatch record from Unit 429 in my wallet, because whatever is still riding that road isn't finished, and no one in authority wants to explain why. The refueling glitch. I had been driving for Creek Carrier for over 2 decades, making coast-to-coast hauls that left little room for error. At 42, I considered myself experienced, cautious, and highly observant. My life on the road followed a strict routine: route planning, logbook updates, fuel stops, and long stretches of solitary driving. Over the years, I had learned to trust my instincts, monitor my truck meticulously, and anticipate potential hazards before they became serious. I rarely encountered anything that unsettled me. Routine was my lifeline, and predictability was my safeguard. That sense of control ended abruptly on one late September night in 2020, near North Platte, Nebraska, when a routine fuel stop became something entirely unexplainable. I was eastbound on I-80, running low on diesel, when I pulled into the Love's Travel stop just after 11 p.m. The night was calm, almost unnaturally quiet. I swiped my fleet card and began pumping fuel, fully expecting nothing more than the routine beep of the meter and the hiss of diesel flowing into the tank. For 30 seconds, the pump ran normally, then the display flickered, and the gallon counter began spinning backward, subtracting fuel instead of adding it. My tank gauge, which had been steady at a quarter tank, suddenly read empty. I stopped the pump, checked connections, and tried again. The result was identical. The counter spun backward, the gauge dropped, and my engine sputtered in protest. Confused, I went inside to report the issue to the cashier. She inspected the system and insisted that no errors were logged. When I showed her my tank gauge, she called the manager. The manager reviewed the transaction records and his face went pale. According to the system, I had pumped negative 47 gallons. He emphasized that such a reading was impossible. After refunding my card, he suggested I move to a different pump. I relocated to pump 8 and attempted to refuel again. This time, the gallons counted up normally, but when I reached 50 gallons, the pump stopped automatically. The display flashed a message that seemed impossible. Transaction completed 11 years ago. The printed receipt confirmed it. The date was September 14th, 2009. Below the date was a line that read, "Driver ID, Curtis Rawlings. Status unresolved." I had heard that name before. Curtis Rawlings, a driver who vanished on I-70 in Illinois under circumstances that had always unsettled truckers in our circle. Different state, different cargo, different year, but the exact same pattern of disappearance. I showed the receipt to the manager. He admitted quietly that the pump at that location, Pump 8, had been exhibiting anomalies since 2009. Random transactions would appear from Curtis Rawlings, showing negative fuel, backward counters, and receipts printing his name. The company had replaced the hardware 3 times over the years, yet the issue persisted. Drivers avoided that pump. Some reported fuel draining from their tanks instead of filling. Others claimed to see a man near Pump 8, silent, observing as trucks refueled. I left the stop immediately, feeling increasingly unnerved. As I merged back onto I-80, my fuel gauge fluctuated violently, full, then empty, then full again. My engine sputtered, stalled, then roared back to life unpredictably. I barely made it to the next truck stop in Ogallala before the truck completely died. Mechanics found nothing wrong. Fuel lines were clear, tanks full, all systems normal. But my logs reflected the impossible. I had refueled in North Platte 11 years ago. GPS records and fleet card data showed no recorded stop there, even as my odometer confirmed the miles traveled. It was as if the truck itself had intersected with a moment in the past. I filed a report with Crete Carrier. They reviewed GPS logs, fuel card transactions, and truck diagnostics. According to their systems, I had never stopped in North Platte, yet the physical evidence, the receipt, the fluctuating tank readings, the mechanical anomalies, confirmed the event had occurred. Crete Carrier referred the case to the Nebraska State Patrol. The investigation into Curtis Rawlings' disappearance revealed a classified cargo bound for a military installation in Colorado, transported for a defense contractor. The cargo had vanished along with Curtis, and federal authorities quietly closed the case in 2010, citing national security. State and federal records remain classified, with minimal documentation released publicly. Despite the official closure, truckers continued reporting anomalies at the North Platte Loves. Pumps would run backward, receipts from 2009 would print, and the occasional sighting of a man matching Curtis Rawlings' description near Pump 8 persisted. Drivers described feeling watched, a silent dread that came without warning. Some reported checking their mirrors and seeing no one, yet hearing footsteps or sensing a presence just behind the cab. Others noted their fuel gauges fluctuating in isolated sections of the station, despite engines off and no movement. These accounts were corroborated informally through driver forums and private communications, but remained uninvestigated by federal authorities. Months later, Love's corporate finally ordered the demolition and reconstruction of the entire fuel island. They excavated the underground tanks beneath Pump 8 and uncovered something long buried: a corroded steel container containing military-grade electronics and a handwritten note stating, "They're watching the fuel stops." The FBI seized the container immediately. The case was classified, leaving the container's contents and its connection to Curtis Rawlings' disappearance unresolved in public records. The pumps were replaced, the site rebuilt, but the same anomalies continued to surface. Drivers avoided Pump 8, and reports of backward fueling, ghostly receipts, and inexplicable fuel gauge fluctuations persisted. The event left me in a constant state of hyper-awareness on the road. I rerouted fuel stops around North Platte entirely, even if it meant running dangerously low. I reviewed maintenance logs obsessively, cross-referencing fuel card transactions with GPS coordinates to ensure that anomalies did not repeat. I spoke privately with other drivers who had experienced similar events, but most avoided public discussion, fearing career repercussions or being labeled delusional. The underlying reality became clear. This was a system, hidden and partially controlled, involving high-level authority oversight, institutional silence, and ongoing operational anomalies. Reflecting on the incident, I understood that Curtis Rawlings' disappearance was only one part of a larger, concealed mechanism. The fuel stop anomalies, backward meters, ghost receipts, and buried container indicated deliberate concealment of a high-security operation that intersected with everyday trucking routes. Despite official closures and federal intervention, the phenomena persisted. The silent dread experienced by those on-site, combined with the systemic manipulation of fuel systems, demonstrated that the site remained active in some capacity, continuing to intersect with unsuspecting drivers. I continue to plan fuel stops carefully, deliberately avoiding that area of Nebraska. The memory of the pump, the receipt from 2009, and the sense of being observed have remained with me, a lingering awareness that the hidden system could strike again. Somewhere in Nebraska, Pump 8 continues its anomalies, tied to a driver who vanished 11 years ago, a container of classified material, and a web of institutional silence. For anyone who encounters that station, the danger is not immediate in a visible sense, but persistent and unresolved. The story does not end with a cleared receipt or replaced hardware. It continues as an ongoing threat, proof that some operations exist quietly beneath the infrastructure we take for granted. Even now, over a year later, I remain cautious, constantly monitoring fuel transactions and GPS coordinates. The intersection of past and present, the glitch in the pump, and the unresolved disappearance of Curtis Rawlings stand as a testament to the hidden mechanisms controlling ordinary spaces. The anomaly is not an error, but a deliberate intersection of logistics, surveillance, and unexplained phenomena. The site is still active in its own way, and the warning is simple. Do not trust every routine. Somewhere in Nebraska, the pump continues to dispense fuel to a driver who vanished more than a decade ago, and it waits silently for the next one. The Mirror Truck. I was 31 years old in June of 2021, an owner-operator running my own Peterbilt 579 across the Southwest. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it was predictable. I hauled contracted freight, mostly furniture, appliances, packaged goods, routes I'd driven dozens of times. Phoenix to Albuquerque along I-40 was one of the easiest. Long stretches of open road, minimal elevation changes, truck stops spaced just right. I liked night driving, less traffic, fewer surprises. My routine never changed. Pre-trip inspection at dusk, logbook updated, tires checked twice. I trusted that truck because I knew every sound it made. I'd customized it over the years, auxiliary lights, seat adjustments, a dent in the fender from a Tucson parking lot that I never bothered to fix. It felt like an extension of my body. That's why the first thing I noticed, just after 3 a.m. outside Holbrook, wasn't fear, it was confusion. I saw headlights in my mirror that matched mine exactly. Same height, same spacing, same slightly warm color temperature from aftermarket bulbs I'd installed myself. At first, I assumed it was another Peterbilt from a similar fleet spec. That happens. I eased off the throttle to let him pass. He didn't. I sped up. He sped up. I changed lanes. He followed, perfectly synchronized. There was no drift, no hesitation, no correction lag. That's when it stopped feeling like coincidence. I picked up the CB mic and called out, identifying my rig and asking if the Peterbilt behind me was copying. There was a burst of static. Then my own voice came back through the speaker, repeating my words exactly. Same inflection, same cadence. I dropped the mic. In the mirror, the truck was closer now, 10 feet behind my trailer, riding my blind spot. I could see the cab clearly. Same paint, same trim, same auxiliary lights, same license plate, same dot number. I was looking at my own truck. I braked hard. The other truck braked at the exact same moment, stopping inches from my rear bumper. I pulled onto the shoulder. It followed and stopped parallel. I grabbed my phone and stepped out. The other cab door opened. A figure stepped down wearing my jacket, my boots, my reflective vest. I couldn't see his face. He stayed just out of the headlight spill, but I knew he was watching me. I shouted, asking who he was. He shouted back with my voice, my words. That was the first silent dread moment. The highway empty, no passing traffic, no wind, no engine noise beyond the idle of my own truck. It felt like the sound had been pulled out of the world. I checked my cargo seals, intact. Then I approached the other truck. The closer I got, the worse it became. Every scratch matched, every defect. Even the dried mud on the undercarriage was the same pattern. I opened the cab. It was empty, engine running, dash lit. The GPS displayed my route, my ETA, my stops. Inside, everything matched: seat position, air freshener, coffee mug. The logbook was open to the current date. Same trip, same mileage. The driver name read Mirror Operator. I heard footsteps behind me. The figure was at the door. He reached toward me. I didn't fight. I ran. When I climbed back into my truck and looked again, the other rig was gone. No lights, no engine noise, just empty asphalt. I drove straight through to Albuquerque and reported the incident to New Mexico State Police. They searched the corridor and found nothing, but traffic camera footage told a different story. Cameras along I-40 captured two identical Peterbilts driving in tandem, both displaying my plate and DOT number. They tracked them for 20 miles. Then both vanished between camera intervals. That triggered a multi-agency review. Arizona DOT ran my registration and confirmed my truck's location in Albuquerque, but their system also showed a duplicate registration, same plate, same dot, issued in 2019 to a driver named Michael Torres, deceased. I'd never heard the name, but his records were extensive. Owner-operator, same truck model, same routes, same freight types. Torres had died in a single-vehicle crash near Flagstaff. No skid marks. No mechanical failure. Witnesses reported him swerving as if avoiding another vehicle that was never found. Arizona Highway Patrol reopened the file. They reviewed Torres's dash cam footage, which had been archived but never fully analyzed. The recording showed another Peterbilt pacing him, mirroring every move. The final note in the investigation read, "Driver appeared to be fleeing from his own vehicle." That was the hidden pattern. Same routes, same truck, same behavior, and an institutional failure to connect to the cases. When I requested the full dash cam footage, I was denied. I was told it was part of an ongoing review. DOT officials advised me not to pursue it further. My insurance company quietly suggested I sell the truck. I noticed unmarked vehicles near my yard after that. I received calls that hung up when I answered. My logs were audited twice in 1 month without explanation. 3 months later, I sold the Peterbilt. I drive a different truck now, different make, different color, different configuration. But sometimes, late at night on I-40, I still see headlights in my mirror that match too closely. And I know the mirror truck didn't disappear. It just found another driver. The system still hasn't corrected the duplicate registration, and Michael Torres's case remains officially closed. The dispatcher. I was 38 years old in August of 2019, working as a long-haul company driver on Southeast regional routes. I had been with the same carrier long enough to know how the system behaved when it was functioning correctly. Dispatch followed patterns. Assignments came from known terminals. Deviations generated calls. Everything left a digital trail. Nothing appeared without an origin. My days were structured down to the minute. I woke before dawn in sleeper berths or cheap motels, logged my hours, inspected the truck, synced the onboard tablet, and waited for instructions. The tablet was the job. It tracked my location, my speed, my hours, my fuel usage, my messages. If something went wrong, the tablet showed it. If something changed, dispatch called. That predictability was what made the industry tolerable. On the morning it started, I had just completed a routine delivery on the outskirts of Atlanta. It was a standard dry van unload. No delays, no damage, no discrepancies. I pulled into the staging area, shut down the engine, and opened the tablet to wait for my next assignment. This was normal downtime. Sometimes dispatch took minutes, sometimes an hour. The tablet refreshed. A new load assignment appeared without the usual alert tone. Pickup, Macon, Georgia. Delivery, Montgomery, Alabama. Cargo, industrial shelving units. Priority, rush. The dispatcher field didn't show a name or terminal code. It read, Operator 17. That detail stood out immediately. Dispatchers didn't use operator labels. They were people with names or numeric identifiers tied to regional offices. I had never seen an operator designation in 5 years of driving. I assumed it was a formatting glitch and called the main dispatch line. The dispatcher who answered pulled up my driver profile and told me she didn't see any active load. I read the assignment details verbatim. She checked again. Still nothing. No Macon pickup, no Montgomery delivery, no dispatcher listed as Operator 17. She told me to ignore the message and wait for a valid assignment. When I hung up, the tablet updated on its own. The same assignment remained, but the interface had changed. The borders pulsed faintly, drawing attention. A new line appeared beneath the delivery window. Immediate departure required. I attempted to back out of the screen. The tablet wouldn't respond. I tried opening my logs, locked. Messages, locked. Navigation, locked. The assignment was the only function available. I attempted to power down the tablet. It shut off, rebooted, and returned to the same screen. At that point, I believed it was a system malfunction. Fleet software failed more often than management admitted. I didn't want to be the driver who ignored a legitimate rush load because of a temporary sync error. The pickup location was real. I had delivered there before. I started the truck and drove south. Macon was quiet when I arrived. The depot was operating as usual. The guard checked my bill of lading and waved me through. Inside the office, the dock supervisor said I wasn't scheduled. Then he refreshed his screen. My order appeared. It was flagged priority. The consignee field again listed Operator 17. He frowned, but didn't question it further. The warehouse loaded my trailer with palletized shelving units, counted and wrapped. He sealed the doors and handed me the manifest. The paperwork was legitimate. Correct formatting, correct serials, everything scanned clean. I attempted to call dispatch again. My phone showed full signal, but every call dropped after the first ring. I tried different numbers, same result. My CB radio emitted only static, no chatter, no weather, no emergency channel. The tablet pinged, stay on schedule, do not deviate, delivery window closing. I drove west toward Montgomery. As I crossed into Alabama, the sense that something was wrong intensified. There were no updates from dispatch, no check-ins. The tablet remained locked to the assignment screen. Every 15 minutes, a new message appeared from Operator 17, reminding me of my delivery window. The GPS guided me off I-85 into an industrial park I didn't recognize. The roads were wide but empty. Identical warehouse structures stretched in rows. No signage, no company names, no parked vehicles. The delivery address led to a blank building. No dock numbers, no posted address, no company markings. As I slowed, a bay door began to rise automatically. A man stepped out wearing my company's uniform. Shirt, patch, ID badge. He motioned for me to back in. I didn't recognize him, but uniforms circulated, lost, shared. Contractors. I backed the trailer into the bay. He gestured for me to disconnect. I hesitated. He approached the cab and tapped on my window, holding a clipboard. The delivery receipt was already filled out. Signed at the bottom, Operator 17, received. I disconnected the trailer and pulled forward. When I checked my mirror, the bay door was closing. The man was gone. The trailer was gone. I parked and got out. The building had no windows, no visible office, no posted permits. I walked the perimeter, no sound, no traffic. The entire industrial park felt unoccupied, like a model set built and abandoned. I tried calling dispatch again. This time, the call went through. The dispatcher told me I was still en route to Montgomery with an ETA 2 hours out. According to their system, I had not yet arrived. My tablet showed the delivery as complete. The receipt uploaded. A new assignment appeared. Return to Atlanta, Operator 17. I refused and drove directly to the nearest terminal in Birmingham. Management pulled my tablet logs. They could see the messages from Operator 17, but the core dispatch system showed no record of those loads. My GPS data showed I had driven into Montgomery, but the coordinates ended in an unregistered zone. The location didn't exist in their mapping database. IT escalated the issue to corporate security. Their analysis found that the Operator 17 messages had been sent through legitimate internal channels. The authentication keys were valid. The routing passed through proxy servers in multiple states. No origin terminal, no user credentials, no IP address that resolved to a physical location. The paperwork I received was authentic. The signature matched no employee. The FBI was notified. Agents took my statement and traveled to Montgomery. They located the industrial park. County records showed the building had been abandoned for 6 years. No active lease, no utilities, no business filings. Inside, they found my trailer, empty. The seals were intact, the locks were unbroken. Swift suspended me pending investigation. They said it resembled cargo theft. I was effectively isolated. No work, no income, no answers. For weeks, I waited while federal agents reviewed system logs and interviewed IT staff. Eventually, the FBI cleared me. They concluded the dispatch had been orchestrated by someone with internal system access, possibly an organized theft operation exploiting drivers as unknowing couriers. The disappearance of cargo from sealed trailers suggested inside coordination at delivery endpoints. No arrests were made. An analyst later showed me a list compiled during the investigation. Between 2015 and 2019, 17 drivers had reported similar incidents. Phantom dispatchers, untraceable delivery sites, loads vanishing without broken seals. Operator 17 appeared in every case. 3 drivers had been charged before the pattern emerged. 2 quit the industry entirely. 1 reportedly disappeared from the job market altogether. Swift terminated my contract anyway, citing liability concerns. I transitioned to local routes, day shifts, paper logs, no onboard tablets, no GPS dispatch. Every now and then, I still think about that warehouse, the way the bay door opened before I stopped, the silence when the trailer vanished, the certainty with which the system guided me to a place that officially didn't exist. The rest area. I was 44 years old, and by that point in my life the road had become ordinary in the most clinical sense. I didn't romanticize it. I didn't fear it either. Driving was a system, routes assigned, hours logged, fuel burned, sleep taken when regulations allowed. I worked coast-to-coast freight for a national carrier, running long lanes that stitched together distribution centers and industrial parks most people never thought about. My cab was clean, my records were accurate. I stayed invisible, which is how drivers survive long enough to retire. In early 2020, my days followed the same pattern they had for years. Wake in the cab or a motel, pre-trip inspection, confirm load seals, roll out. I listened to talk radio until it faded into static, then drove in silence. I trusted signage, mile markers, and the accumulated muscle memory of thousands of hours behind the wheel. I didn't improvise, I didn't explore, I stopped where I was told to stop. The night this began, I was westbound on I-70 through central Kansas. I had already logged close to the maximum hours allowed, pushing the edge but still legal. Fatigue sat behind my eyes like pressure, not panic, just the dull awareness that my reaction time was slowing. I needed a place to shut down for a few hours. A full truck stop would mean circling for parking, burning time I didn't have. I was watching for a rest area. The trigger came in the form of a blue highway sign, rest area, 1 mile, mile marker 208. I remember noticing it because it surprised me. I'd run that corridor dozens of times and didn't recall a rest area there, but memory on the road is unreliable. Facilities open and close. States rebuild things. I didn't question it further. The off-ramp appeared exactly where it should have. Clean pavement, reflective markers, no barricades. I slowed, signaled, and took it. The highway noise dropped away almost immediately, replaced by a stillness that felt heavier than silence. At the end of the ramp was a wide parking lot, evenly lit by tall lamps. Roughly a dozen trucks were already parked, lined up with more order than usual. That registered as comforting at the time. Proof that this was a real place. I pulled into an open slot, set the brake, and logged my stop in my paper logbook out of habit. The air outside was cold but calm. No wind, no insects, no voices. I locked the cab and walked toward the facilities building. From the outside it looked standard. Concrete block, glass doors, state insignia. Inside, everything appeared operational. Restrooms were clean, vending machines were stocked and humming. A wall display showed highway maps and safety notices. I washed my hands and noticed the health inspection certificate posted near the sinks. It was dated August 2015, 5 years out of date. That should have concerned me more than it did. Fatigue has a way of flattening instincts. I told myself someone had forgotten to replace it. I bought a coffee from the vending machine and walked back outside. Crossing the lot, I became aware of something I hadn't consciously noticed before. The trucks parked around me weren't just older models. They were specific models, ones I hadn't seen in regular service in years. Late 1990s and early 2000s tractors, all in near-perfect condition. Polished tanks, clean tires. Company logos that looked familiar but outdated. Designs phased out more than a decade earlier. I walked closer to one, a red tractor with a household goods logo I recognized from early in my career. The branding style hadn't been used since the mid-2000s. The DOT placard format was old as well. Everything about the truck suggested it didn't belong on the road anymore, and yet it looked maintained better than most modern rigs. I moved down the line. Every truck told the same story. Different carriers, different colors, but all preserved in the same way, as if frozen at the moment they'd last been relevant. One cab had its interior light on. I stepped up and tapped on the window. The driver was inside, slumped forward over the steering wheel. His hands rested where they would have been while driving. His head was down. I knocked harder. He didn't move. A slow, cold realization began to spread through me. I checked another truck. Same posture, another, same. Every cab I looked into contained a driver, motionless, engines idling softly. No radios playing, no phones glowing. Just still bodies and running motors. The lot was completely silent. Even the highway, a few hundred yards away, seemed muted. It felt like sound had been absorbed. I went back to the facilities building, my pace faster now. There was a payphone mounted on the wall near the entrance, an outdated thing I hadn't noticed before. I picked up the receiver. No dial tone. I checked my cell phone. No signal. That alone wasn't alarming in rural Kansas, but combined with everything else, it mattered. I stepped back outside and scanned the lot. No movement, no doors opening, no footsteps. The lights hummed faintly overhead, but that was it. I ran back to my truck and climbed into the cab. I turned the key. The dash lights flickered. The starter clicked. The engine didn't turn over. I tried again. Same result. I checked the fuel gauge. Plenty. I tried the CB radio. Static filled the cab, then cut abruptly. A voice came through, low and clear, not distorted by distance or interference. "You shouldn't have stopped here." The words felt close, as if spoken from just outside the door. I looked up and saw a man standing beside my truck. He wore a state patrol uniform. The details were correct. Hat, badge placement, reflective striping. He stood squarely, hands at his sides, posture formal. I rolled the window down a few inches and told him my truck wouldn't start. His face didn't change. His eyes looked flat, unfocused, like glass. He told me the rest area was closed and I needed to leave. I said I couldn't, that my engine wouldn't turn over, that I needed assistance. He smiled then, but it wasn't reassurance. "It was empty," he said. "Then you'll stay like the others." Something in his tone made it clear this wasn't a warning. It was a statement of fact. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I opened the door and ran. I ran past the parked trucks, past the building, toward the on-ramp. I expected him to chase me. He didn't. I didn't hear footsteps behind me at all. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs shook, until I reached the shoulder of the interstate. A semi passed, then another. I waved my arms until one slowed and pulled onto the shoulder. The driver rolled down his window, alarmed. I told him I needed help. He radioed it in. When State Patrol arrived, there were 2 vehicles, different uniforms, different faces. I told them everything, the rest area, the trucks, the drivers, the patrolmen. They listened without interrupting. Then one of them told me there was no rest area at mile 208. It had been demolished years earlier. I insisted I'd just come from there. They exchanged looks and said they'd take me back. The off-ramp was there, but it was overgrown with weeds. Concrete barriers blocked the entrance. Warning signs leaned at angles, faded by sun and time. Beyond them, there was nothing. No parking lot, no lights, no building. My truck was parked on the shoulder of the highway, engine running smoothly. The door was locked. Inside, my logbook lay open on the dash. A 47-minute stop was recorded in my handwriting. I had no memory of moving the truck. In the days that followed, I gave formal statements. My employer reviewed my vehicle's electronic data. The engine control module showed the engine had never shut off. GPS data showed I had never left the highway corridor. There was no record of an off-ramp maneuver. And yet, my handwritten logbook contradicted all of it. That was when I began requesting records on my own. Closure notices from the Transportation Department. Old inspection reports. Archived incident logs. The site at mile 208 had a longer history than I'd known. Before the rest area, it had been a private truck stop that closed in the late 1990s after a carbon monoxide leak killed multiple drivers in their sleeper cabs. Engines left running, faulty exhaust systems. The bodies were found days later, all parked in the lot. The property was condemned, then redeveloped as a state rest area. That facility was closed in 2017 after what were described as unexplained incidents. No further details were provided. When I asked for them, my requests stalled. Files were redacted. Calls went unanswered. An investigator who initially spoke with me stopped returning messages. I was advised, unofficially, that fatigue-related hallucinations were common in long-haul drivers, and that revisiting the issue wasn't productive. The resistance was subtle, but consistent. A patrol car idled outside my apartment one evening and left when I stepped outside. An anonymous voicemail told me to stop confusing memory with reality. The critical evidence came from a retired transportation official who responded to one of my letters. He sent copies of internal memos and a ledger of complaints that never became public. Drivers reporting stops at a closed rest area, engines running, time unaccounted for. Some drivers returned to the road. Others were listed as missing, their cases unresolved. There was no dramatic raid, no public reckoning. A federal review was announced quietly. Certain files were sealed. The site was fenced again. Officially, nothing was found. I still drive. I plan my stops carefully now. I don't use rest areas after dark. Somewhere along I-70, there is a place that appears open when it isn't, and according to the records, it doesn't exist. The load switch. I was 33 years old in July of 2021. By that point, driving freight had stopped feeling temporary and started feeling permanent. I'd been with Old Dominion Freight Line for 6 years, long enough to know which routes stayed predictable and which ones quietly collected stories drivers didn't repeat. I ran less than truckload routes through Central Texas, Dallas to Houston, Houston to San Antonio, back north through Waco. It was steady work, not glamorous, but reliable. My days followed a narrow pattern: sleep from late morning to early evening. Wake, check dispatch notes, review manifests, head to the yard. I didn't rush. I double-checked seals, logged my hours clean, avoided unnecessary conversations. I lived alone in a small apartment outside Temple, close enough to the interstate that I could hear traffic at night if I left the window open. The road was constant. Everything else rotated around it. Nothing about July 18th suggested it would be different. My assignment was ordinary: sealed electronics load, Dallas pickup, Houston delivery. Trailer number 4471. No hazmat, no special handling. I reviewed the paperwork twice out of habit. Everything matched. I hooked the trailer just after sunset, confirmed the seal number against the manifest, logged departure, and rolled south. Texas highways at night have a particular quiet to them. Even when traffic is present, it feels spread thin, stretched out. Radios fade in and out. Headlights appear and vanish without interaction. That night was clear, warm, and uneventful. I settled into the drive without thinking much past the next stop. Near Waco, I pulled into a familiar way station. I'd stopped there dozens of times over the years. The lot was lit, but mostly empty. I wanted to adjust my load straps and verify axle weights before continuing. I set the brakes, locked the trailer, and walked inside to use the restroom. I didn't linger. I washed my hands, checked my phone, no messages, and walked back out. 10 minutes, maybe less. From the outside, the trailer looked exactly as it had when I left it. Same paintwear, same scuffs, same seal hanging from the latch. I climbed back into the cab and checked my onboard weight display before pulling out. The number was wrong. It wasn't off by a little. It was off by roughly 3,000 pounds. At first, I assumed the sensor was acting up. Weight systems glitch. Temperature changes can affect readings. I cycled the display and checked again. Same number. I stepped out and walked the length of the trailer, looking for anything obvious. Tires, suspension, signs of tampering. Everything looked normal. The seal was intact. The lock was mine. The placards matched the manifest. The trailer hadn't been opened, but something had changed. When I checked the trailer number stenciled near the nose, my stomach tightened. It read 40470. My assigned trailer was 40471, one-digit difference, subtle enough that someone rushing wouldn't notice, close enough that it could be dismissed as a misread if there wasn't already a problem demanding attention. I pulled out my paperwork and compared it again. Trailer 4471, electronics, Dallas pickup. Everything correct. I called dispatch. The dispatcher confirmed my assignment without hesitation. When I told her I was physically attached to trailer 4470, she went quiet. I could hear typing on her end, then a pause long enough to feel deliberate. She told me trailer 4470 was not active. According to their system, it had been decommissioned in 2018 after a fatal accident near Austin. The trailer had detached from a tractor at highway speed, crossed into oncoming traffic, and killed the driver. The equipment was listed as permanently removed from service. I told her I was standing in front of it. She transferred me to safety. Safety instructed me to disconnect immediately and wait for road service. No explanation beyond that. Just a calm insistence that I step away from the equipment and not attempt to move it. I walked back toward the doors again, uneasy in a way I couldn't yet explain. The seal was still intact. But when I leaned in close and looked through the narrow gap between the door and the frame, I saw movement. Not cargo shifting, not straps swaying. Something passed in front of the interior reflections. A shadow, deliberate and slow, moving laterally, as if pacing inside a space that should have been empty. I stepped back. I called Texas DPS. The troopers arrived about 20 minutes later. They inspected the trailer, verified the number, and asked for my keys. I refused. I told them something was inside. One of them said that wasn't possible. The trailer was sealed. He suggested stress or fatigue. I insisted they open it with me present. After a brief discussion between them, they agreed. The trooper cut the seal. He unlocked the doors. When he pulled them open, the interior was empty. No cargo, no straps, no pallets. Just bare aluminum walls, scuffed and worn. The smell was neutral. No electronics, no fuel, nothing organic. The weight reading in my cab didn't change. The trooper closed the doors again without comment and told me to wait. He walked back to his patrol car and made a call I couldn't hear. The way station felt unusually still. No trucks passing. No wind. Even the hum of the lights seemed distant. I stood beside my truck and watched the trailer, aware of every second passing. 30 minutes later, a plain sedan arrived. 2 men stepped out. No uniforms, no visible badges. They spoke quietly with the trooper, then approached me. One asked for my manifest. The other circled the trailer slowly, taking notes. They told me to disconnect the trailer and leave it at the way station. They said they would handle the situation. I asked what was inside. One of them looked at me for a long moment and said, "You don't want to know. Trust me." The trooper ordered me to comply. As I pulled away, I saw more vehicles arriving, unmarked vans, a flatbed, people wearing protective gear. No one acknowledged me. I wasn't allowed to stop. Dispatch called an hour later. They said trailer 4470 had been recovered and that my original trailer, 4471, was waiting at a facility in Waco. When I arrived, it was exactly as it should have been. Same seals, same cargo, same paperwork. I delivered to Houston without incident. Later, reviewing my black box data, I saw that it recorded 6 hours parked at the way station. I remembered one. Old Dominion's safety department opened an internal investigation. They confirmed trailer 4470 was officially decommissioned. But its GPS data showed movement. Intermittent trips across Texas for 3 years. Always at night. always rural highways, always hooked to trucks whose drivers reported lost time. The FBI contacted me 2 months later. They classified the case under transportation security regulations. I was instructed not to discuss it publicly. I received compensation, a commendation, and reassignment to local routes. I still see trailer 4470 sometimes. Same number, same markings, different driver each time. Always alone, always staring straight ahead. I don't follow anymore, because whatever was inside that trailer didn't stay there, and it's still moving. The toll booth. I was 49 years old in October of 2019, and I'd been driving freight long enough that nothing about the job felt unusual anymore. My days followed the same structure they had for nearly 3 decades. Clock in, inspect the truck, confirm the route, drive through the night while the rest of the country slept. I worked priority runs for a national freight carrier. Long haul but predictable. I trusted systems, dispatch software, GPS routing, electronic toll records. They were supposed to remove human error from the road. That belief is the first thing this story took from me. The run from Indianapolis to New York was routine. I entered Pennsylvania after midnight, merged onto the turnpike, and settled into a steady eastbound pace. Traffic was light. Weather was clear. I was alert and on schedule. Around 2 a.m., approaching Breezewood, overhead signs diverted traffic. One lane was marked for electronic tolls. Another sign flashed cash only, right lane. That didn't make sense. I hadn't carried cash for tolls in years. I slowed, expecting the sign to correct itself, but cones forced me right. The booth I pulled up to looked old. Wood siding, dim yellow lighting, paint worn thin. The attendant leaned forward through the window. He was elderly, wearing a uniform that didn't match any current standard I recognized. Wool coat, flat cap, a badge that reflected light but showed no emblem. "That'll be $47, he said. I told him I used an electronic transponder. He shook his head slowly. "Doesn't work here, cash only." I handed him a 50. He placed it in a drawer I couldn't see, returned $3 in change, worn bills, soft from age, and waved me through. No receipt, no ticket. Just a quiet, drive safe now. I merged back onto the turnpike and continued east. 20 minutes later, I approached another toll plaza. The layout was identical. Same curve, same lighting. My GPS confirmed I was still heading in the correct direction. This time, the electronic lanes were open. I passed through without stopping. The sign flashed, toll paid. I didn't think about it again until later that morning when I checked my account. 2 toll charges, same plaza, 30 minutes apart. I contacted the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission and reported the discrepancy. They reviewed my transponder log and confirmed a single electronic transaction. No record of a cash booth. No manual toll entry. They told me the second charge was impossible. I insisted. I described the booth, the attendant, the cash payment. There was a pause on the line. Then the representative told me all toll booths at Breezewood had been fully automated since 2016. There were no cash lanes. There hadn't been for years. They asked if I still had the change. I did. The 3 $1 bills were still in my wallet. I photographed them and sent the images as requested. The serial numbers dated to the late 1980s. The condition was wrong. No creases, no wear consistent with circulation. The case was forwarded to Pennsylvania State Police. A trooper contacted me 2 days later. He asked precise questions. Exact lane position, timestamps, physical description of the booth. When I finished, he told me something he shouldn't have. A cash toll booth had existed at that exact location until 1994. It had been demolished after a robbery. The collector, a man named Raymond Goss, had worked that booth for over 30 years. He was 71 when he was shot and killed during a late-night shift. The assailant was never identified. The cash drawer was never recovered. After his death, reports began coming in. Drivers claimed they had paid cash at a booth that no longer existed. Charges never appeared in official records. The complaints were dismissed internally as confusion or fraud attempts. Between 1995 and 2016, 17 such complaints were filed. None were investigated beyond basic denial. My employer reviewed my vehicle telemetry. They confirmed something that escalated the situation from billing dispute to formal inquiry. My GPS data showed my truck stopped for 4 minutes at the location where the old booth had once stood. During that same 4-minute window, my transponder recorded passage through the automated lane 300 yards ahead. According to the data, I had occupied 2 locations simultaneously. That finding triggered an internal compliance review. It went nowhere. The Turnpike Commission refunded the duplicate charge and closed the case. No explanation was issued, no follow-up offered. I kept the bills. I had them examined by a currency specialist. The serials were legitimate, issued by the U.S. Treasury in 1987, but the paper stock showed none of the degradation expected after decades in circulation. No environmental exposure, no handling wear. It was as if they had been stored untouched since the night they were printed. 3 months later, I was back on the same route. Night run, clear weather. As I approached Breezewood around 2 a.m., the sign lit again. Cash only, right lane. I stayed left. As I passed, I looked to my right. The booth was there, dim lights, wood siding, and Raymond Goss leaning out, one hand raised, waiting. I did not slow down. No further investigation was ever opened. No official explanation exists. The Turnpike Commission maintains that no such booth has existed for decades. State police records referencing the complaints are heavily redacted. Internally, the matter is considered resolved. I no longer drive that road at night. Because somewhere near Breezewood, a toll is still being collected. Off the books, outside the system, and the man assigned to that booth never clocked out. The final run. I was 52 years old and had spent 3 decades behind the wheel when I received the assignment that would make me question everything I thought I knew about the roads I had driven for most of my life. It was December 2021, and I was finishing out my contract with Prime Inc., running what should have been a routine haul from Kansas City to Denver. This was to be my final run before retirement, the last mile before I turned in my logbooks, collected my pension, and spent time with my grandchildren. My routine had always been meticulous. Pre-trip inspections, route planning, rest breaks, and careful adherence to schedules. I knew every stretch of I-70 west through Kansas into Colorado, every incline, every way station, every rest stop. My life had become a series of predictable patterns. Each mile logged and each truck stop cataloged. That night, the predictability ended. The load was light and standard, construction materials, nothing of note. I picked up just after midnight, expecting a straightforward drive. Around 3 a.m., past Colby, Kansas, I noticed the first anomaly. The highway was empty. I-70 is never completely deserted, not in 30 years of driving. There are always trucks, cars, maintenance crews, rest stop traffic. But for 50 miles there was nothing. No vehicles, no lights beyond my own, no signs of life except the faint glow of distant farmhouses. The isolation was immediate and unnerving. The air felt heavier than usual, the darkness oppressive, and I realized I was completely alone on a highway that should have been busy at that hour. Then the lights appeared. In my rearview mirror, I saw a convoy, 15 trucks, their headlights perfectly synchronized, moving faster than I had ever driven. I checked my speed, 75 miles per hour. They had to be doing at least 90. I moved to the right lane, expecting them to pass. They didn't. They stayed behind me, following at a precise 15-foot distance, as if my truck were guiding them. I grabbed my CB radio. "Breaker, breaker, convoy behind me, back off," I called. Static answered, then a calm, mechanical voice. "Final run, driver, stay in formation." The words chilled me. I tried to slow down. The convoy slowed, I accelerated. My engine protested, knocking and losing power, yet the lead trucks remained in perfect formation. I was boxed in, a passenger in my own vehicle. We drove like that for 20 miles, the rhythmic glow of headlights fixed behind me. When we reached mile 437, all 15 trucks, including mine, took an exit I had never noticed before. My steering locked, brakes unresponsive. I was being guided off the highway. The exit led to a dirt road, winding and unmarked, eventually opening onto an abandoned airfield. The runways were cracked and overgrown, hangars rusted and derelict, the control tower shattered and hollow. The convoy stopped in formation. My engine died. The silence was absolute. I sat in the cab, heart pounding, waiting for some explanation. Then I heard footsteps, dozens of them circling my truck. I looked out and saw drivers emerging from the other trucks, moving toward the control tower. They walked in unison, their movement deliberate, mechanical, silent. I locked the doors, heart hammering. One figure paused at my window, gesturing toward the tower, then vanished back into the darkness. I waited, counting minutes. 5, 10, nothing. I tried my phone, no signal, ignition, dead. Eventually, I stepped out. The airfield was silent, as if abandoned for decades. I approached the control tower cautiously. The door was open, revealing a basement stairwell descending into darkness. I hesitated, then entered. The basement was vast, a network of tunnels lined with filing cabinets, old radio equipment, and maps dating back to the 1960s, marked with routes, coordinates, and coded symbols I could not decipher. In the center, a desk bore a logbook, opened to the current date. I approached cautiously. The entries were meticulous. Drivers listed by name, route, and status. I found my name, marked Final Run, Status, Pending. Hundreds of other entries lined the pages, dating back to 1962. All marked Final Run, Completed. It was a record of disappearances and deliveries spanning 6 decades, maintained in a hidden cache, unknown to the public. I realized the scope. This was not a rogue operation. This was a systematic, decades-long logistics network involving drivers across generations. Then I heard footsteps. A man appeared at the entrance, uniformed, in the style of the 1960s Air Force. He observed me, expression unreadable, and said, "You're early. Final runs are scheduled for dawn." I asked what this place was. He smiled faintly. "Delivery depot. We've been collecting freight here for 60 years. You're the last driver on the list." Fear propelled me. I ran, climbing stairs and racing across the airfield to my truck. Keys in the ignition, engine started, and I drove back to the dirt road, eventually rejoining the highway. I did not stop until Denver. I contacted Prime Inc., delivered the load, and quit on the spot. Their internal investigation confirmed the location I described existed only as a dirt access road on modern maps. The airfield, hangars, and control tower were gone. GPS records showed I never left I-70, yet my handwritten logbook indicated a 4-hour stop at mile 437. Subsequent research confirmed that during the Cold War, the Air Force had maintained a classified logistics facility near the site I described. It had been decommissioned in 1975 and demolished. Yet drivers continued to report anomalous sightings, convoys appearing at night, vehicles disappearing at mile 437, and figures in period military uniforms directing trucks into spaces that no longer existed. The facility's history, combined with first-hand reports, indicated a hidden conspiracy spanning decades, involving both authority oversight and systemic secrecy. I kept the logbook I had discovered. Inside, hundreds of names, drivers, dates, and statuses documented final runs completed, yet never publicly acknowledged. On the last page, in handwriting not mine, a message read, "The roads never forget." That message has haunted me. I retired, no longer drive, yet I still hear faint static and voices on the CB radio, as if the network persists. Every so often, late at night, a voice calls, "Final run, driver, we're waiting." I never respond. The final run revealed a system hidden in plain sight, a conspiracy intersecting highways, government authority, and generations of drivers. The physical site may be gone, GPS coordinates erased, and official records cleared, but the operations continue in shadow. The airfield, the convoy, the logbook, the mechanical drivers, all evidence that the roads themselves serve as conduits for a hidden, ongoing operation. I survived, yet the knowledge remains. Somewhere, drivers are still guided off highways, into facilities that should not exist, part of a network older than any living memory, preserved by institutional silence and federal discretion. The final run is complete for me, but the system persists, invisible and unresolved,